They say history ends not with an explosion, but with a name. It happened in silence, not the silence of reverence, but the kind that presses against your chest, waiting to be broken by something irreversible. The crowd stood in St. Peter's Square, like statues of flesh, eyes raised, breaths held, cameras locked in, millions watching. One name about to fall from the heavens like a stone, and then it came. Leo XIV. It didn't echo like thunder. It landed like a whisper, heavy, ancient, final. Not a name from Italy, not from Africa, not from the old Christian roots of Europe, but from America, from the empire of media, data, and disbelief. In that instant, scholars paused mid-sentence. Clerics lowered their eyes. And somewhere in the invisible layers of time that stretch across prophecy and memory, something stirred. A long-forgotten line began to breathe again, because hundreds of years ago a prophecy was written, a list of names and symbols ending with a final shepherd. Not named Leo, named Peter, Peter the Roman. But what if prophecy doesn't follow logic? What if the last name isn't literal but symbolic? And what if this quiet man from the West, wearing the name of lions and the weight of silence, isn't just a new pope, but the last one? In the 12th century, long before cameras, microphones, or Twitter feeds, an Irish bishop fell silent. His name was Malachy, and what he left behind wasn't a sermon, but a sequence. A mysterious list of 112 mottos, each one marking a future pope, each one cryptic, poetic, veiled in metaphor. They said it was a forgery, a medieval fiction. And yet, one by one, the names came to life. Not always precisely, but close enough to disturb. De Medietate Lunae, the Pope who died beneath the half-moon. De Labore Solis, born and buried during solar eclipses. Gloria Olivae, a symbol of peace chosen before a time of global unrest. Coincidence, some claimed, selective interpretation, but no one could explain the final line, the one that broke the pattern. No motto, no poetry, just a sentence, a warning. In the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church, Peter the Roman will reign, feeding the flock through many tribulations. After these things, the city of 7 hills will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge his people. The end. Peter the Roman, a name that has never been used by any pope in history. A name that carries weight, judgment, apocalypse. So the Vatican avoided it. Silently, systematically, no one dared to touch the shadow of that prophecy. Until now, because Leo XIV is not Peter. But what if names are only veils? What if Leo is not a contradiction to the prophecy, but its fulfillment by other means? A lion instead of a rock. A man from the new Rome, not the old. A shepherd not of Europe, but of the empire that now shapes the world. And what if Malachy never meant Peter by name, but Peter by essence? A final shepherd for a final age. History doesn't always tell the truth. Sometimes it hides it. For centuries, the prophecy of Saint Malachy remained in the margins, relegated to footnotes, dismissed by academics, whispered only among monks and mystics. It first appeared in 1595, nearly 5 centuries after Malachy's death, published in a book called Lignum Vitae. No one knew where it had been kept. No one could say for sure if it was truly his. But it was there, etched in Latin, sharp as a blade, eerily prescient. Each motto was linked to a future pope, described with poetic precision. Some referred to family crests, others to birthplaces or notable acts. And whether by divine design or unconscious pattern, the list marched through history one papacy at a time, until it didn't. Because after 111 popes, the language changes. It stops being cryptic and becomes clear. It doesn't hint, it warns. In persecutione extrema, in the final persecution, Petros Romanus, Peter the Roman, and then silence. It was as if the prophecy exhausted itself on that last line, leaving no room for successors, no footnotes for correction, just judgment. But here's where myth and reality blur. Because no pope ever took the name Peter again, it became taboo, cursed. To do so would be to step directly into the storm. And so, Across centuries of change, reformation, revolution, collapse, war, the line was carefully avoided, until a name emerged. Not Peter, Leo, but not just any Leo. The first in over a century. The 14th in a line marked by fierce theology and spiritual warfare. The heir to Leo XIV, the Pope who warned of Satan's century. The echo of Leo XIV, the pontiff of the Reformation. Names carry stories. And Leo is not neutral. In Scripture, the lion is both Christ and the adversary. In prophecy, it is the roar before the fall. So when a man from Chicago, a son of the secular empire, steps forward under the name Leo XIV, we are no longer in the realm of politics. We are in the realm of signs. And the list of 112 may not be a map of popes. It may be a countdown, not to a coronation, but to a reckoning. Robert Francis Prevost was not born into prophecy. He was born into noise, steel, traffic, ambition. Chicago in the 1950s was a machine, grinding forward without pause. There were no whispers of sainthood in his childhood, no prophecies spoken over his crib. Just a boy with quiet eyes, growing up in a world too loud to notice silence. But that silence followed him. While others chased power or profit, Robert turned inward. He joined the order of St. Augustine, not for prestige, but for purpose. Not to be seen, but to serve. And it was there in the discipline of ancient vows and forgotten languages that the church began to shape him, not with glory, but with grit. He went where few wanted to go, to Peru, to poverty, to places where faith is not worn but lived. He didn't preach to crowds. He listened to widows. He didn't build cathedrals. He carried buckets. He didn't chase microphones. He chased meaning. For over a decade, he lived on the margins, where the sacred isn't rehearsed but survives, where sacraments are passed like bread between the hungry and the hopeful, where doctrine bleeds into dirt. And when he returned to the north, he didn't come with accolades. He came with scars. He rose quietly, first as provincial, then as superior general, then as prefect of bishops, a position so powerful, so strategic, that most people outside Vatican walls don't even know it exists. He was no longer just a priest. He was the one choosing the priests, the sculptor behind the shepherds, the silent hand shaping the church's future. But even then, he remained quiet. No public campaigns, no divisive speeches, only a steady presence. A man who knew what was crumbling and what must be preserved. And then, the conclave. A gathering tense with factions, some pushing progress, others pulling tradition. Names were floated, hopes were weaponized. But in the end, the cardinals didn't choose a politician. They chose a pastor. And he chose a name. Leo. A name unspoken for over a century. A name etched into battles of spirit and shadow. A name that echoed the warnings of old. Because Robert knew what he was stepping into. He wasn't just becoming pope. He was becoming a signal, a marker in time, a lion seated not in triumph, but in vigilance. Prophecy is rarely literal. It moves in symbols. It whispers in patterns. It hides in plain sight. And so the world waits for a Peter and misses the man who bears his weight. Because perhaps Peter the Roman was never meant to be a name, but a function, a posture, a purpose. Not a fisherman by trade, but by spirit. Not a Roman by blood, but by burden. And when Leo XIV stepped out onto the balcony, it wasn't just to receive applause, it was to complete a circuit that began long ago. He is not Peter in title, but he is Peter in role, the one who feeds the flock in tribulation. And the tribulation is here, not with swords, but with screens, not with fire, but with forgetting, not with emperors, but algorithms. The church is no longer under siege from outside armies, it is dissolving from within. Doctrine diluted, tradition politicized, reverence replaced with relevance. And Leo does not fight it with force. He doesn't yell, he doesn't campaign, he simply watches, he guards. Like a shepherd in a storm, standing on the hill while the wolves circle closer. The United States, his birthplace, is the empire of now, the new Rome. It exports ideas faster than any army could march. Its culture colonizes without flags. Its morality shifts like sand. And from that empire, a pope rises, not to conquer, but to warn. His papacy is not a new chapter, it's a mirror, reflecting the final line of the prophecy, not in name, but in nature. Because every verse about Peter the Roman speaks not of triumph, but of sorrow, not of expansion, but of holding on. Not of glorious revival, but of faithful resistance. In the final persecution, he shall feed his flock. This is not language of victory, it's language of survival, of endurance, of last things. And Leo XIV embodies that posture, not because he is perfect, but because he knows what time it is. The time when faith isn't loud, it's hidden. When worship isn't applauded, it's mocked. When truth isn't declared, it's lived in silence. And in choosing the name Leo, he placed himself at the center of that tension. Because lions don't plead. They watch, they wait. And when the hour comes, they rise. And now we reach the edge, not just of a narrative, but of something deeper, an era, a current, a covenant. Because Leo XIV's rise does not feel like the beginning of something new. It feels like the end of something sacred. For centuries, the Church marched forward, through wars, through schisms, through plague and fire. It evolved. It fractured, it rebuilt, but it never stopped breathing until now. Now the breath is shallow, the voice is thin, the pews are empty. The light in the sanctuary flickers, not from lack of oil, but from lack of wonder. And into this fading comes a man who says nothing loud, a man who makes no promises, who stirs no revival, and yet stands. That's what makes it feel final. Because this Pope does not come to build, he comes to witness, to watch the unraveling, to tend the flame while the wind rises. And perhaps that is the deepest fulfillment of the prophecy, that Peter the Roman would not be a conqueror, he would be the last to remain, standing at the gate as the city falls behind him, not to save it, but to shepherd those who still listen, to feed the faithful in famine, to guard the sacred when the sacred is no longer seen as necessary. This is why the prophecy feels alive, not because we see angels or trumpets, but because we feel the silence closing in, because we know deep down that something holy is being swallowed by something hollow. And Leo, he doesn't resist the tide, he stands in it. That's the ambiguity. Is he the Lion of Judah echoing Christ, steady in the storm, or is he the other lion, the one that Peter warned of, prowling, silent, devouring? The prophecy gives no answer. It only gives a name, Peter the Roman, and says he will feed the flock through many tribulations, no victory, no ascension, just a shepherd and a storm. And the question that pierces all theology is not about who Leo XIV is, it's about what comes after him, because the prophecy ends where judgment begins, and in that space between the shepherd and the sword, the only thing left is you. So now the gaze turns, not toward the balcony, not toward Rome, but toward you. Because if Leo XIV truly is the shepherd of tribulation, the final echo of an ancient line, then the prophecy is no longer about him. It's about those he feeds, those who still hunger for truth, those who wake in the middle of the night feeling the weight of something unseen, something ending. The final pope isn't the climax of the story. He's the sign that your chapter has begun, and that's the part we so often miss. We think prophecy is a spectacle, a sky split open, a scroll unfurled, but more often it's a mirror, a question, a quiet hand pointing inward. Because what good is knowing the final shepherd if you don't know the condition of your own soul? What good is decoding the name if you can't carry the cross? The church may fall, the city of 7 hills may be reduced to stone and silence, but the fire doesn't die in cathedrals, it dies in hearts. And that's the real warning. Not that the Pope is the last, but that you might be. The last to pray, the last to believe, the last to guard the lamp when all others have gone dim. The age of comfort is over. The time of spectacle has ended. What's left now is endurance, the quiet discipline of faith in an age of doubt, the steady rhythm of prayer in a world of noise, the courage to believe when belief is a burden. So what will you do with this moment? Will you chase headlines or holiness, Will you wait for signs in the sky, or recognize the lion already seated at the gate? Because maybe the prophecy was never about predicting the end. Maybe it was about preparing a people strong enough to endure it. And if that's true, then the next move isn't Rome's. It's yours. If something stirred inside you, if the silence felt heavier than usual, if the name Leo XIV no longer sounds like coincidence, then don't stop here. This story isn't finished. Because if he truly is the last, what comes next will change everything. Watch the full series, the signs are already unfolding, and the final page might already be turning.